Hello everyone, and welcome to our session, Accelerate Innovation with Guidewire Cloud Updates. Before we get started, I want to clarify that the scope of this session is more focused with material on InsuranceSuite. However, the principles and practices that we will discuss are broadly applicable patterns that we're working in Guidewire across all of our applications. As a reminder, our friendly safe harbor slide. Any future-looking statements that you hear today in this presentation are covered under a safe harbor agreement. The intention is to have an open and honest conversation about what we're intending to do and be as transparent as possible. So with that said, nothing that we mentioned today can modify any existing agreements that you have with Guidewire. Taking a look at our agenda for this afternoon, we have about 45 minutes together where for about 5 minutes we'll cover an introduction on cloud updates. And for about 10 minutes, we'll go through the mechanics on how Guidewire Cloud Updates work. And for about 10 minutes, we'll talk about the Guidewire Cloud Update process, what it means to you with a little bit of a demo. Delivering value faster starts with upgrading to Guidewire Cloud. And the upgrade to Guidewire Cloud is cost-effective in the sense that you can upgrade now directly with Cloud Direct. And Guidewire is outpacing self-managed at an accelerating rate. You can upgrade to cloud, keep your current customizations, realize a lower TCO, total cost of ownership, and be on a platform that stays technically current. The longer that our customers wait to upgrade to cloud, the more upgrades become complicated between that gap as the value gap increases. And for self-managed customers, you saw on the main stage that it's an average of 3 to 5 years behind, and that gap is growing. And this is because upgrades are large and disruptive. Whereas for InsuranceSuite customers, the upgrade to cloud is the last one, and then after that, Guidewire is providing automated updates. So for cloud updates, they achieve a similar outcome as what you are maybe thinking about with the self-managed upgrade. That is to update your infrastructure, update third-party dependency support, and to introduce new product features. Whereas on one hand, the customer is fully responsible for the self-managed upgrades because of the large nature of them and the three-way merges that need to happen. And on the other hand, Guidewire is responsible for delivering ongoing cloud updates. Where we deliver small, more frequent, less disruptive updates, we carve out a layer that the customer is meant to modify, and that creates a pathway for Guidewire to automate, as you know, Snowcat. And our vision for updates is to have all of our customers always on the latest release. And we achieve this with a developer-like philosophy. That is, we approach our updates to provide seamless updates all the way through adoption. We preserve the customer's modifications and investments in place with providing forward-compatible APIs, and we want to make feature adoption straightforward. InsuranceSuite has two distinct layers. There's a customer layer, which is a set of files that are intended to be extended and modified by our customers, and there's a Guidewire layer that contains a set of runtime artifacts that are Guidewire artifacts, not meant to be modified by our customers. Today, this is a logical separation instead of a physical separation, and Guidewire is working to create a physical barrier, a physical separation between the two. And the composition of these layers looks as this, maybe the most important slide, and this will be detailed in our Flen docs. So the Guidewire layer contains things like your data model, type lists, things of that nature, whereas the customer layer contains the extensions to the data model, the extensions to the type list. This is where we say it's a logical separation, and we're working to bake it into a physical separation. As you know, where you make your data model changes should be in the ETX file, not in the ETI file. But we really have never put the handcuffs on that scenario in the past. Now we will. And we mentioned that these layers are treated differently during the update process. So the customer layer is not modified by Guidewire during the update process because it has all of your preserved changes. So Guidewire may provide some scripts to help ease automation for the update process or some trivial bugs. But for the most part, the Guidewire layer should not be modified by customers because it is completely ripped and replaced during the update, as you saw on the main stage. And as a visual, using the InsuranceSuite applications, the Guidewire layer from Elysian to Flen is ripped and replaced while the customer layer is preserved. And remember that cloud updates are to the application platform. The Guidewire Cloud platform is actually updating more frequently at every 2 weeks to drive value for you. So Guidewire is providing straightforward new feature adoption as we move forward. And what does that mean? So to uncomplicate how we provide new feature adoptions, we're providing and enabling consistent new feature adoption experience. We set straightforward expectations on how the system will behave before the update and after the update. And we provide a clear framework on how to adopt the features with the expected effort to the accompanying feature to do that. Now that we understand the concepts of layers, this is our simple matrix that we use to drive through how the features work, and it's effective with the delivery of Flen. Irrespective of any system changes, investments in the customer layer are preserved. So if you want to adopt a new feature in the customer layer, it will require some effort. And then features in the Guidewire layer, if the system behavior is unchanged, we can enable it by default. Whereas the system behavior is changed, we have to make it configuration-driven parameter for you to enable it. Also, as I mentioned before, and I'll mention again, Guidewire will provide some automated scripts to ease the adoption of some features in some scenarios, as an example in the customer layer. So updates contain new and different types of features that may require some effort to adopt. So the best way to do this is to look at some examples and talk through those features. To get started, looking at the global ratings variable feature on the top row. It requires a merge of files into the customer layer and then enabling that with your business. This will require effort. It's in the customer layer. Whereas if we look at the new Claim Center API endpoints, app events, APD blue-green, these are examples where the feature is delivered to you in a dormant-like fashion. It's in the Guidewire layer for the most part. And so a customer can adopt these features at their own pace. And lastly, there's examples such as database version upgrades, where there's really not much for the customer to do, and the customer doesn't have much to say on it. This is Guidewire keeping you technically current on the technologies. So Guidewire is making it easy to adopt these features, and what we mean when we say that by that is that we're providing a list of the impacted files, we're providing a guide explaining the expected overlap with the merge process, and we're providing the relative effort to adopt the feature when it's in the customer layer. So most importantly, our project teams will contribute back cleaner ways as they go through this process on how to implement these new features. That was pretty cool. So now after we've heard us talk through the mechanics of how a Guidewire Cloud Update works, Guidewire's made a ton of products on the mechanics thanks to the engineering team. And what we're all probably wondering is, what does this process look and feel like as a customer? So Guidewire provides you an annual update. And if a customer would like to participate in more frequent updates, you can reach out to your technical account manager. We'd be glad to have you. And customers with Dobson or later will receive automated updates using that snowcap process that was mentioned on the main stage. And to deliver you the update in a non-disruptive manner, we also provide you an update environment. And to be clear, this does not use your customer environment credits. This is just provided by Guidewire. And so we support two update options. We will update as a primary option, or the default option from Guidewire, your production branch or your main branch. And the alternative option that we provide is the update implementation branches. Here we update the customer's dev branch that they provide or choose to us. And this is so you can always go live on the latest version on your path. So if you've not gone to production yet or you have a follow-on release, it may be an attractive option. And during the update process, Guidewire does not require any additional access to customer code, assuming all changes can be implemented practically through automation. Now, there will be some cases where we may need to make a modification or have a conversation with a customer, and we will follow the standard request process when that happens. And customers are currently planning around 8 weeks for this process end to end, from the planning to the adoption, where 3 to 6 weeks, the majority of that time is really set aside for that customer to do update validation. And that's their size of what they do to validate the update, so sometimes fast, sometimes long. Viewing this as a timeline, about 16 weeks prior to general availability of a new ski resort release, such as Flen, we add our customers in cloud to our update pipeline. And here we work to remove any chance of introducing breaking changes as we do our development to the customer's preserved layer. And during this process, the customer is informed of any changes they've made to the Guidewire layer, which will be required to be resolved so they can receive a smooth update. Now, if there's nothing for the customer to do, great, they can move forward. And we expect this to get cleaner and smoother with each update. And then after the release is made generally available, Guidewire delivers the update to the customer. So that all sounds pretty cool. However, we should take a closer look behind the scenes at how Guidewire actually does this process end-to-end using our internal update report. So it all starts with having our customers added to that update pipeline. And here we've blurred out our customers for sensitive data, but there's a few things worth noting. We can see well in advance that our customers, if they have any break-in changes to the Guidewire layer, and we communicate those changes back out to our customer teams. And as a preview to our roadmap, you'll notice that GUnit test execution is a potential that we have, and you can also imagine GT API and GT UI will fit nicely into this report and our intentions. So keep building tests on the Guidewire testing framework to provide value for your purposes now, for testing your configuration, and to align your future value for cloud updates. And finally, you can see that we can do this under scale update testing. Here you can see the total execution time was around 14 minutes for around 80 customer tenants being updated at once. And for our supported options that I mentioned, the 2 supported options, customers will want to know the division of labor that happens between Guidewire and the customer. So while we build out each new ski resort release and run continuously nightly builds using the customer configuration to make sure we don't introduce the breaking changes, we do additional testing prior to delivering the update. We make sure that the update compiles, we execute all the customer available server tests, and we start the server. And for the production updates, the production option of updates, we do a little bit more. We back up and restore a customer-provided database to that update environment. We Dockerize the Guidewire-provided update branch, which ensures that all those server tests were passing. And we deploy that update and log into the application before handing it back over to the customer to validate. So for the customer, what this means is you resolve the changes to the Guidewire layer, you conduct your version of update validation, and you release to production based off your business schedule. So there's no eye trickery here, there's no sleight of hand, and each column is equally spaced. This visually depicts the types of projects that are equally called into question and comparison, and that is not really an apples-to-apples comparison, but a major upgrade, a minor upgrade, and now, as you know it, a cloud update. The reason it's not an apples-to-apples comparison is because even though they achieve similar outcomes, they have a fundamentally different foundation. And so the headline here is that by moving to cloud, it significantly reduces your involvement. It simplifies the process, it simplifies the activities, it gives you back your time, and you get to enjoy being on a platform that helps you stay technically current. And with that, the floor is open. We have a microphone stand up in front. Or if you raise your hand, we have a microphone runner in here, Mr. Mark Cool in the back, raising the microphone. We can get a microphone over to you.
Hello, I have a question. So, my question is around this, the adoption. There's like those 3 bullet points that you had, like here's the customer's role in an update. And so I'm just trying to think through, like, if Guidewire, in the Guidewire layer, there's a method or a library that's getting used by the customer layer, and the functionality changes just slightly so that something isn't working for that the customer is intending. Is that just kind of like, because it sounds like that's still like the same upgrade process, but maybe it's happening less often, those conflicts. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about like the work that a customer or a developer would have to do.
Yep, so everything in Snowcat is going to make sure that everything syntactically continues to work, but I think what you're referring to is what happens if there's a semantic change to a method. And so for those examples, what we really expect is that every customer is going to have their own regression pack for going live. And that may be fully automated or manual, and depending on what you want to do, that you're still going to run through that pack before you actually go live. Generally speaking, because of the awareness and change to the development process within Guidewire engineering, we're avoiding semantic changes to methods as much as possible. But that's a little bit more error-prone than what we can do syntactically.
And a lot of our investment and effort is focused on how do we chip away at that energy and concern. I know we have a lot more questions than that one question. There he is.
I have a question about the self-managed and versus cloud, the SaaS solution. So the self-managed could be like, AWS, Azure, or anything, or like, is there any kind of restriction on that?
Sorry, so what you're asking is, do we do anything if you're in self-managed for this pipeline?
Any cloud, or it could be any cloud?
So Snowcat only works if you're in GWCP specifically. And so the way that our tooling works is if we host all of your code repositories, that's how we're actually able to do all of our regression testing. So even if you're hosted in AWS, if you're not actually connected in through GWCP, we have no way of incorporating your code into our testing.
And that starts with Dobson and beyond for the automated tooling. Mark, do we have any questions in the back?
Any questions? It's all clear, huh? Well, can you tell us a little bit more about what constitutes a non-breaking change?
What constitutes a non-breaking change?
You talk about like taking care of making sure that there are non-breaking changes in the customer app. So what are there examples of a change that has broken the release?
The most obvious answer would be if you change an API signature, right? If you previously needed 3 parameters and now you require 4, that will break every customer implementation.
Just a general question around, there's obviously a lot of self-managed customers here that are looking to move to the cloud. And we've had the product for a while. We're in version 8. We've done a significant amount of advanced customization as well as the configuration. When we moved to the cloud, we know that we actually did rewrite some of that code. So when you talk about the Guidewire code layer versus the customer code layer, when you're going through the upgrade process to go to the cloud, is that all reviewed? And then anything that you've done for all intents and purposes that's Guidewire's managed code, that's now off the table?
Yeah, so the Guidewire layer is defined fairly conservatively. And so it covers things like a lot of our binary jar files, like Zach was just telling you. It also covers things like ETI files that we've always specified weren't meant to be changed. If you ever wanted to extend the data model, it was always recommended that you extended it through an ETX file. Same thing with type lists and whatnot. As clarity, for example, the entire PCF layer is considered customer layer. So all of those customizations that you've done in those areas will continue to work.
I want to build on that. I think from a customer perspective, if you've already gone through your cloud assurance processes to move to the cloud, what you'll also notice is that they're checking for things that you need to enter the cloud. And then once you're in the cloud, you're concerned more about what are your updatability factors so I can keep moving from update to update. So that kind of changes, right? So how do I get to the cloud is lift and shift. Like what integration patterns do I need to potentially refactor so that way things will work different from on-prem to an in-cloud implementation. And then once you're in the cloud, it turns into what updatability factors do I need to focus on to move from ski resort A, B, C, D, E, F. And so there is a large overlap in a lot of that, but there are some outliers that may show up. So you are receiving a lot of advice through cloud assurances straight away that is looking for the updatability factors to set you along the right path. But it doesn't mean that you might not run into an updatability factor later. So as an example, in that report, when we looked across like 80 customer tenants, on average, a customer has 0 to 1 breaking files. So it's not much for most customers. But it's not to say that there's not an outlier. There's an example of like one customer there that has a lot, but that is an outlier. The average is 0 to 1.
How do you handle deprecating fields in this process?
So going forward, in general, we are avoiding deprecation, but in the case that we do want to actually deprecate something, the way this would work is we'd mark something as deprecated, and we'd communicate that out to the community of customers. And once we see that every customer has moved off using that particular parameter or method, then we would actually remove it. And so our approach is going to be very different in this case. Whereas in the past, our deprecation policy was we would mark something as deprecated and remove it in the next major release. At this point, we're going to be able to be much more specific with each customer and working with you to make sure you actually have an alternative for the deprecation and it's satisfactory.
We have some in-house custom Java classes that we deploy through a jar file. Is that type of structure still supported, or will that have to be updated or something to get rid of those?
That's just to continue to work.
Okay.
Yeah, custom third-party libraries and jars are customers' preserved layer.
So I just have another question about, it sounds like there will still be some work for developers after an update and for your testing team potentially. But I'm just wondering, with the separation of the cloud layer and the customer layer, what is something that you would want to communicate to a customer of, like, is there anything we can do to make, like, the Guidewire team's job easier? Or if we're adhering to, like, the cloud standards, it's just like we won't even have to think about it, really?
Yeah, so if you adhere to our best practices and standards, that's going to be just enough. And so there are examples where I know customers have decompiled our jars, put in custom code, and recompiled them. And so that will make updates more problematic. But I mean, that's probably more of an edge case than the standard.
I would add to that, continue to test in the Guidewire testing framework for customers who are on the cloud. As you could see and hear us tease out, having the common testing infrastructure is important for us for validating updates in the future. We have no promises for how that will work for test execution, ownership or maintenance of tests, so I need to be clear of that. But it's important that for tests, it's 3 points. You need to test your own configurations anyways, and it's good to have the automation on those tests, and it creates a pathway using the common testing infrastructure for Guidewire to use those tests to help validate that update as we're testing it internally before we release it. And if we have your rules written in those tests, it helps all of us mutually.
Hi, Ben and Zach. Zach, I believe you in your slide you talked about InsuranceSuite particularly, but there are other products that Guidewire owns, InsuranceNow, the data product, Jutro design system. How does this stuff apply to other products outside of the suite?
So I'd say the same methodology, same sort of mental model for thinking about it is going to apply. InsuranceSuite is where we're most mature in our thinking and actual delivery of automated updates. But we're going to continue to keep all customers within an N-2 release on all of our other products, and Guidewire will be funding that and taking care of that work.
I would just add that our priority is InsuranceSuite, Digital, Data Hub, and Info Center, and we're executing in that order right now. And iNow and the testing frameworks are in there as well.
Hi, question. So we're, excuse my voice. We're in the process of moving to Guidewire Cloud today. We're currently in development phases. One thing I'm worried about is integrations and things that the customer needs to manage. And we're not a dev shop, right? So I've been thinking about how will we be managing the product's lifecycle as we do self upgrades through your Bitbucket code repository. That's something that's just been on my mind since walking around listening to these conferences.
So to make sure I understand the question, so you're saying you don't have much in terms of the way of dev resource. So when we deliver a new update to you, you're sort of curious how we're going to ensure things continue to work?
That's
Or-
correct. Like there are integrations and other things that will get, I guess, data that comes out of Guidewire and the downstream systems.
I guess I would ask, how would you normally handle this for any change or any release that you currently push into
So
production?
we have a third-party devs that help us handle this today with our on-premise system. So I'm thinking it's going to be something similar, but I don't know what that will look like for cloud, and that's pretty much what I've been thinking about.
So I think the way that I would think about it is when you make the move to Guidewire Cloud, you're still going to have a code repository that gets managed. It doesn't get converted into just a pure service, right? And so if you're currently using a third-party service to do some of that testing and validation today, you'd likely go and do that in the future as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Layla. I work with Ellen, and we're from HEMIC. But just curious about, I'm hearing mixed advisement in terms of releases each year. You know, we would likely go up on Plen, and wondering about sort of what the recommendation is as far as you can be one release behind, and talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'm from engineering, and I'm always going to tell you that you should be on the latest release. We've put a lot of time and effort into making sure that's possible, but we absolutely recognize that as far as a lot of the automated regression testing goes, there is a wide range of variance amongst the customer base, and it absolutely makes sense that you're going to want to validate your implementation before you go live. So if you happen to have the automated testing or the capacity to be able to do that testing every time we do a release, we absolutely advocate and recommend that you stay on the latest. And we will always deliver that latest to you.
What I would add on to that, Ben's answer, which is great, is that that's why we support two options for updates. So if you're not in production yet, you may consider updating implementation. Or if you're in production and you have a follow-on release, which is maybe a business release, it may be worth updating that business release so that way it's, you know, you're still making sure you're catching that update train and getting it out to production as well. Now, we recommend personally to take the updates, isolate them, and get them to production as fast as possible, but we understand that you have a business schedule and that until you get into a behavior of taking updates on a regular cadence and making a little bit of time to do that, we want to provide that option for you to marry those two objectives.
So you mentioned the two layers, of course, the customer layer, the cloud layer. When upgrades come, we have the option, not upgrades, but features come, we have the option, let me reword that. In the customer layer, there's a lot of work potentially for us to take in that new feature. There might be work we need to do to make it work. But when it's in the cloud layer, you could deliver it dormant. We might not need to do any work. Will you ever deliver something that's a feature that's in the cloud layer that we will have to do work because it can't lay dormant? It's new, we need to take it, it's going to be an active part of the application.
I'd say so pretty much every change that we deliver today is going to be an enhancement and adding capability. I think that if you were to ask, are there any features that require changes in the customer layer? What I think we have seen in the past two releases is if we make changes to like our authorization code, that is typically one area where changes are required. What we have done is Zach mentioned that we have something that we call update steps, which is an automated way for us to modify those files for you. And because we have access to your repositories, we're able to run that automation and ensure that whatever steps we've written actually successfully execute. So there may be, in some instances, features where you are required to take a change in the customer layer, but we're also going to try to automate those to the greatest extent possible. We've yet to run into a scenario where we couldn't automate it.
And I think you were also asking, if I got it right or wrong, is like if you make a change in the Guidewire layer that's going to require a customer to do something on their end.
So one example of that is because we provide you a Guidewire layer feature, and even if it's delivered in a dormant way, what would it take to use that feature? So we could give you a toggle like blue-green, and we say that it's no effort to adopt it. And you saw it on the main stage when we did a blue-green deployment. It looked pretty simple. However, you may have some of your individual resources that might have to think about whatever your operational plans are and procedures, how do you use it yourself, right? And so it's more of a business change management sometimes to use it, instead of it being a technical or dev implementation to use it. And so we've taken away that work when we provide you a dormant feature. How you use it would potentially still be on the business to enable it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So if I wanted to make a modification to our customer layer, how soon would it be able to get deployed? Is there a review process that it goes through on your side in order to make sure that it meets your standards? Or, is there any delay? Because I know our company is very aggressive as far as taking new functionality updates and that kind of stuff. And also, if you could just speak to like the release structure, like you refer to it as a business deployment. Is that business deployment schedule up to us, or is that really something that Guidewire says, okay, your schedule is going to be once a month or once a quarter or whatever?
You want me to talk to it? Or go ahead.
Sorry, can you repeat the first part of that question again?
Yeah, so if I check in code today, how soon would it actually get deployed to the non-production environments for users to start testing? Because I know that they're very aggressive. Like, I'll get requests at 5 o'clock, hey, can you get this in tonight? And it's pretty routine that this happens. So is there a review process that before it gets put into an environment, so if I put it in at 5 p.m., would there be any time delay where it has to be reviewed by you guys first?
No, there wouldn't be. So the way to think about this is that our tooling, Project Snowcat, introduces a drag on Guidewire Engineering's development velocity, but not on your velocity.
And then the second one was the business deployment schedule. Are we pretty much in charge of when we want stuff to go to our production environment?
Yeah, you would continue to decide when you want to actually deploy the change.
Okay, thank you.
To give a little bit more color, we want to move to a place where we could potentially swap the system out or update the system without notifying you. But the way to think about that is a continuum of maturity. And so today, I think you would still need to actually own that deployment. And then at some point in the future, when enough functional validation exists, automated functional validation, and we can minimize the downtime enough, we might actually take that step. But that's very future looking.
And even so, that would look like something where you click to schedule to adopt to agree and for that kind of deployment.
Anyone else? Oh, yeah, over here. Yeah. Oh, good. Thanks. That's fine.
I'm curious for you and your team, what's something that your team has had like a challenge with when going forward with this product, I guess? I don't know what you would call it, but like what's a challenge that you guys had to work through and overcome?
I'd say that one of the biggest challenges that we have is a lot of core product capability exists inside the customer layer. And so when our teams are looking at how we implement new capabilities and whether those are delivered within the customer layer, sometimes it's unavoidable, and then you end up writing update scripts. And so these update steps, the issue with them is it's very difficult to do it in an automated way that's also safe and correct. And so what we end up with is a lot of teams writing a lot of those update steps. We obviously want to try to avoid those. Internally, what we've started doing is we've started measuring, per team, how much of each new capability is built in the Guidewire layer versus the customer layer, and we're trying to incentivize more feature development inside the Guidewire layer. And then that also actually informs platform priorities, because then you have development teams that say, how do I build this feature in a way that I can build all of it in the Guidewire layer? And they say, we don't have a way of doing that today. Right, and then our internal platform team takes that as a requirement to say, we need to provide that ability. And that basically the end result of all of that would be more capabilities delivered to you in a way that's less work to adopt it.
So that's required like a total change in mindset for your team to stop doing stuff in the customer layer and say, let's pull it. That's really
organization, all teams, right? Like all of our IS teams producing apps, all of our digital teams, everybody had to be thinking that way. So it was a big behavior change.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good question.
Any more questions? Any final words, Zach?
Yeah, we have 5 minutes left. To continue this discussion, you can either reach out and email us, reach out to us on the app, or you can stop by the Cloud Updates and testing booth in the Guidewire booth area. So thank you for attending our session today. And also, I'm hoping that you have a great connections, and maybe we'll see you at the party tonight. All right.